All right, so what I want to do in this video is kind of show you how to create code and use some of the helping functions that Xcode has to help you write code more reliably and quicker. So we're going to just start off and continue from our Hello World program from where we left off from some of the previous videos. And I'm going to start with, first of all, how do you create a new file? So these files were already given to us as a part of creating the project, but obviously you're not going to do all your code just in those files. So you're going to want to create a new file for, say, a new data structure that you might be creating, or for a new view that you're going to use in SwiftUI for showing on the phone. So to do that, you want to do Command N, and that is really a shortcut for, let's just cancel and show it here, File, New, File. So either way is fine. So if I do Command N, you'll see I get a bunch of different choices for files here, but there's two that I want to point out. The Swift file, which is really a plain file that is what you can use to declare, say, a struct or declare some set of code that you're going to write, but it really doesn't have anything to do with SwiftUI. It has nothing to do with the user interface at all. And then the other one is the SwiftUI view, which would, and therefore it will give you kind of all the boilerplate for that. So let's start out and let's just declare a Swift file and click Next. And I'm going to call this let's call this utility. And so this is going to be a little utility file that we're going to use. And so notice now we have a new file over here on the left. And then here it just says import foundation. That you need. Foundation is basically like a foundation of a house. It's when you import that, you get all of the Swift standard library and the ability to for the system to really understand all the Swift components. And then what we can do here is we can actually start defining something. So let's say we want to just define a function that anybody can call that says adds two numbers. So again, if you haven't gotten into functions yet, don't worry about it. We're just going to start out. I'm going to say func is how you declare it. We'll call it add. And then what I'm going to do is put in a couple of arguments. So maybe we say A is an int, and B is an int. And then what this is going to do is return A plus B. And because this is returning a value, we have to say that it is going to return a value, and we now have entered our first function that adds two numbers. And if we want to make sure that this compiles, again, to build or compile, we do Command B. And it will build, and we have build succeeded. And so now we've declared our first function, and we can use it. So let's go ahead and try to use it somewhere else. So I'm going to go up here to the content view, and one of the functions or one of the modifiers, again, don't worry about it if you haven't covered modifiers yet, but one of the modifiers is called onAppear, which means that you can put a set of code in there that will run when your view becomes available, when it is appearing on the screen for the user to see. So if I start typing .onAppear, notice I got .ona, and sure enough, it's giving me a couple of potential completions. And that's awesome. So again, these completions are things you want to watch for, and you definitely want to use them because they are going to save you in getting all of your stuff syntactically correct and your ability to write code correctly and compile. So I'm going to pick that first one by just hitting enter. And then what we're going to want to do now is call that function that we just declared. So I could declare a variable here called result, and I could say is equal to, and then I type in add, and you'll notice that right here, there's a function called add A:, B:. And there are other things that are add, but they have other things on them. So they're not as simple as just add. So we're going to arrow down to that one and hit enter, and that's going to pop in the actual call for us and the arguments that need to be there. So we need to say these are named arguments, A:, and B:. And again, if they're not there, we're going to get a compiler error. The completion put it in there for us. It also created a placeholder for these two, and the blue placeholder is where I am right now. So that means that I could just immediately start typing right over where that blue is, and it will replace the int, which is just telling me the type of what needs to be there, with whatever I want. So let's say I want to add 3 and 5. Well, I hit the 3, I've overwritten the int with a 3. I hit the tab to go to the next argument in the list. There I'm going to put a 5. And sure enough, I now have created a result variable that will be the sum, i.e. calling the add function of 3 and 5. And we used completion to do that, which is awesome. Now, the other thing you'll see is that it's complaining that, or warning us, it says, hey, result was never used. Maybe you don't even need to use a variable there. But let's say we are going to use it. So I'll come down here and I'm going to say print. And notice even print is completing. But in this case, I'm just going to say print result. And I'll do Command B to compile. And now everything's looking good. Of course, we're still getting another warning. The other warning is the fact that result was never mutated. So what that means is since result has not changed anywhere in the code, this should be a let rather than a var. And so if we take that away, Command B again, now we have build succeeded and we have no warnings. But we use completion and we're using the compiler. The compiler is giving us all this additional information to make our code really secure and safe and well written. Now, one of the other things I want to show you is navigation. So if I'm here on the add function and I want to see a little bit more about what that add function does, I can just right click. I can click here and then right click and say jump to definition, and it will actually take me to where that was defined, which is awesome. Now, the other thing is if I want to go back, this little back button right here in the upper left, I can just click that and it'll take me right back to where I was. If now that I've kind of gone back in history, I want to go forward again in history, I can just hit the little forward button and I've gone forward to that spot. So that is a great way for you to start writing code. Definitely use completion as much as possible to complete your code and then fill in all your placeholders by just tabbing to them and typing. And that will get you a long way. Now, the next thing I want to do is show you a little bit about basically when you navigate through your code, especially with complex code, you're going to want to collapse and elide your code so that you can kind of see the structure better. So for example, right here, if I put my cursor literally right here to the right and I go left and right over this little bracket, you'll see that it highlights the bracket that's paired with it. So throughout all of our code, whether it is a parenthesis or whether it is a bracket, all of them have to match. They're all paired together and they can be nested inside each other. But sometimes it's really hard when you look at the code to see, gosh, is this one, is this one here paired with this one? Well, no, because literally right here, if I just kind of go back and forth, it highlights the one that it's paired with. So you want to use those highlights to see that everything is matched up. Now, if everything builds properly, that means that everything is matched up. But sometimes we miss something. So for example, if I were to just take this out and then I would do a build, you'll notice way down here it's saying it's expecting this close bracket. And that's because we didn't close it here. This is actually the one that's closing it. This is closing that one. But we know that we should have closed off this struct before we got into a new struct, right? Even though we don't know what structs are, the logic it would be that that's probably the case. So you can use those to kind of search through and say, oh, that's where I needed it, because sometimes the compiler doesn't know where it should go. And so sometimes those error messages aren't that helpful. You just know that they're not matched. The other thing to do is sometimes you want to collapse code together into a single statement that all goes together. So for example, here on this VStack, notice where it starts and ends, right? It's here to here. So if I come over here to these bars, you'll see this bar highlight. If I click on the top arrow, it has basically elided or collapsed all that code together in the editor. So this is only for visual. It hasn't actually removed any code or anything, but it's collapsed it so that we can kind of better see the structure here. So the structure is this VStack with a bunch of stuff in it, and then we have our on up here, and then we have some code. And we can see over here on the left, we also get an indication that some stuff has been elided. Now, to expand that back, we can literally just click on that blue area and boom, we bring it back. Or over here where we have the dot, 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 we can bring it back. So I just double tap there and I can bring up back the code that I had. And again, this is pretty simple. So I'm going to open up Parliament for a minute, and we'll just go to some things that are potentially a little more involved. So if I go to my primary view here, and I see that I have a list, and I have a section, and I have a form, and these are all nested inside each other. And maybe what I want to do is I want to just work at the end of the form. So I can literally come up here, click on this Elide, and it literally has elided all the code that is in the form, which is a great way for me then to just start typing something. Like right here, I could start typing text, you know, hello world. Again, you don't understand, I realize, the different widgets so far, but here, basically, this elision or collapse got us to the other brace, and now we can add right after it. So I encourage you to use this, because if you're going to try to do this manually, like you've got this form here, but as you come down here, you get all the way, which one of these closure, you know, which one of these right here is related to the form? And you can't easily see that. And in fact, even if I'm putting my cursor here, so I see there, but what about this one? This one, I can't see what it's highlighting because it's way off the screen up front. And that's where you want to use the collapse and elide.